on, so are you vaccinated yet?
Yeah, well, it's a thing that everyone asks
Yeah.
because it definitely has an impact.
Hmm. Right. Oh,
Of course, it doesn't stop you from getting anything. It just means that if you do get it, it won't be as severe,
right.
which is
Yeah.
fine,
Kind of like the flu shot.
uh, I guess. I mean,
Yeah. I
I
don't
get
know.
my flu shot every year. I don't think I've had the flu for quite a few years. Of course, now that I open my mouth, who knows what'll happen.
Yeah. Don't say that. Yeah.
So I spoke to that client of mine that
Yep.
is getting I guess someone from
We set him up. So Gary, my colleague, contacted him and they chatted and they set him up and he's getting a virtual audit through one of our recommended consultants. So he's very happy.
Yeah, I don't think enough people understand that it's worth going through what OSHA would go through if they came
Right.
to a place to make sure that you're not in a position to um, have OSHA have to come back.
Well, and especially now, and I don't know, especially now with COVID,
Yeah,
because what we're seeing is the rise in inspections in the workplace due to employee complaints related to COVID-19 safe work practices. So they'll come in, and because there's no, unless you're in a state where there's a state specific rule, because there's no overarching federal rule on what you need to do, they can come in and look at everything
right.
because it's under the general duty clause. So we're seeing and we're dealing with more facilities that are being inspected as a result of COVID-19 employee complaints, if that came out right.
Yeah. So back in my early days in the 70s, we did have OSHA come to visit. And, when they come in, I mean, they will absolutely find things that need to be done.
Oh, yes.
Some of
Oh,
them
yes.
being stupid as hell, but nevertheless, that's their job. I mean, we had a radial arm saw and we were cited for it because the blade didn't go back on its own. I said, well, suppose I put some pegs under the front so that it slides back. Yeah, that'd do. Really? The funniest one, though, in our exposing room, we had a socket and there was no light bulb in it. And so we were
Oh,
cited for that. So that if somebody yawned and they put their finger in the socket, they would get
right.
shocked. And it's like, if they put their finger in the socket, they should
They
get shocked. Those idiots. I mean,
Well,
come
what
on.
people need to understand is that when OSHA comes in, they're going to look for those things that they're familiar with. The
Right.
general industry, they don't understand printing, but they understand electrical. They understand,
Right.
forklifts. They understand housekeeping. They'll look for, well, do you have your PPE assigned? So
Right.
that's what they look for.
Well,
Um,
and I agree with you. I know the one thing I do with every shop that I go to do work with, first question I ask is, do you have a filtration system?
mhm,
Because if anyone comes in and you don't, you're going to get blamed for anything that's in the sewer system.
correct.
And,
Yeah.
and it's such an easy thing to remedy. I mean, an inexpensive system is 500
Well,
bucks.
Well, our good friend Richard Greaves, when I first started in the industry, he was doing presentations at Horizons, which was Midwest. I'm dating myself, which was Midwest Open House,
Right.
and this was way back in the late '80s, early '90s. And I remember he once gave a presentation about reclamation and filtration, and he said to the audience, "Please remember, in 3 days, what you put down the drain comes back out your tap." So, because we're reusing the water and it goes
Yep.
down through the publicly, the POTW, it gets filtered, it gets cleaned, and it comes back. So we said, be very careful and very cognizant of what you put down the drain.
I'm reminded of it's an old story, but there was a printer in Florida way back. OSHA came and they blamed him for the stuff that was in the sewer, some color or whatever. And so he had to defend himself and went to court.
Hmm.
Um, I I think it cost him about 50 grand in attorney fees, etc. In the end, he won and went bankrupt anyway. because they're not responsible for whatever your costs are.
No, they're not.
And that
Yeah.
I don't think enough people understand that. Um, it, it's not just in the U.S. I mean, if they come after you, they will absolutely find things that are wrong. I
Mhm.
mean, I remember we must have been cited with about $30,000 worth of infractions. They gave us 6 months to correct them, and we negotiated on the amount that we would have to pay, and it was probably about $300. But that
Well,
is
and I think
still,
that's what, yeah, that's what people forget that we do at Printing United Alliance. Gary and myself, we help companies when they have these violations or these fines. We work with them, and we work with them to, if they contact us early enough before they go to their informal conferences, and we work with them to get those fines down. And we've been very successful in getting the fines reduced. And that's part of being a member of the alliance.
yeah.
You get this help. So yes, we do regulatory work, but we also do a lot of education and outreach, as you know, on these topics. So,
It's interesting. So I'm on Facebook probably more than I should be. I noticed that what came up was somebody was thinking of joining Printing United, and is it really worthwhile? And there obviously there's a mixed bag there. There are those who um, were members for years and felt they got nothing out of it. Then there are
mhm,
those who felt that it is worthwhile. I mean, I've been a member from the time I started under different things. I think under my current situation, it's 35 years, but um, years before that as well. And someone said, "Well, what do you get out of it?" Well, so for one thing, I don't get technical assistance because if someone's got a technical problem, there's a good chance I'm going to get called.
right.
I said, but part of it is supporting the industry and staying
Mhm,
on top of what's going on in the industry. And you're right, the fact that you guys also will assist with other situations.
mhm,
Um, I think that that's where the money is worth being spent. And
right.
yeah, it's just puzzling to me. Why wouldn't you want to have somebody at your back just in case you need it? Because the
Mhm.
expense itself is no big deal for a company. And
The expense is if you end up having to pay the lawyer fees and everything else to go and contest your case. I know that we're working on a couple of environmental violations as well as safety and health. And what we're also able to see when people bring these issues to us is we can see the trends of what they're looking for in the facilities. So then as a result of seeing those trends, we can either go and ask for a letter of interpretation from OSHA going, this doesn't make a lot of sense, or we can develop some sort of outreach material and education material to get the industry to understand what their obligation is and then push it out there. So it's, we do, probably we do more education and outreach on these issues than people realize.
it's interesting. I
Marcy,
Yes.
Is it are you seeing that only with larger shops, or are they going for inspections on small shops as well?
I do see that they're going for, it doesn't really matter about the size of the facility as much as what the complaint is and what the issue is. So we see that right now with the change in administration that, and I should back up, it also depends on whether or not you have a state-run safety agency or your state is overseen by OSHA, federal OSHA. But what we're seeing is that due to employee complaints, they're going in more and more. And federal OSHA actually came out with a directive that now says that they want their inspectors to go into the facilities and not just do a virtual or do a phone call. So it also, it depends on how egregious your violation is. If your employee calls up just because, they say, oh, it's dirty in here or something, they may not come in. But if they call up and they talk about, that they don't feel safe, they feel like the emergency exits are blocked or something, OSHA is going to come in. So it really does depend on the severity of the issue, but size really doesn't matter. And I think that's what a lot of companies, especially in the apparel market, don't understand, that there are no exemptions from the OSHA regulations. It doesn't matter if you have one employee or two employees, all the regulations that are in force apply. There might be a few where you can say, hey, I'm less than 10 employees, therefore I don't have to have a written emergency evacuation plan, but you still need to keep your records. You still need to report. You still need to put, you still need to post your OSHA Form 300, which everybody here should have posted right now. So, you still have to do all those things. It's just going to be a little easier because you have fewer employees. But OSHA doesn't differentiate on size. And it's interesting you should ask that question. I was doing some research for a presentation a while ago, and I went onto OSHA's site about where they were doing inspections, and you can break it down by NAICS or SIC code. And some of the companies had 1 to 2 employees.
Yeah. It's what's interesting. Although I haven't traveled much in the past year, normally I do travel. And when you come back to the US and you go into shops here, it's amazing to me how few of them would actually pass inspection if they were overseas. What's the perception here is, oh, it's overseas and their rules are far more relaxed and stuff. And it's like, you need to go overseas to see what shops look like. Going into shops that are printing for any of the major brands is
Oh,
always
yes.
interesting. And even in this country, I mean, Latitudes was my biggest account. And in order to print for Nike, you had to have clearly marked evacuation routes that were unobstructed. I go into shops and it's like, okay, so we're in the shop and there's a problem. How do you get out that door? I said, and suppose it's over there. I guess we die. And the answer is, yeah, you do. You need to have, you really do need to have more than one evacuation route.
Right.
And
And you need to run, it's like I say, everything you need to know you learned in kindergarten. You need to have fire drills. You need, so that people know how to get out, so that people know what happens in the case of an emergency. It's important. And it's, pick a nice spring day. I wouldn't pick today. Here it's raining like cats and dogs, but you pick a nice spring day, and so that people know where to meet in case of an emergency. They know what the sound is like when you're evacuating. I mean, how many of us remember when you heard that fire drill sound? Ooh, okay, your adrenaline pumps a little, and so you know where to go, and you know who's going to take roll, and you have all of this, and that's important. And it's important also, as Charlie says, to make sure that all the emergency exit doors are clearly marked, you know how to get out, and you can get out. And then
so 2 of the guys that are on are Farley and Sheehan. I've worked with both of them a little bit, not really worked. We've been at shows together and stuff. Although Sheehan did make all my screens and set up my presses. He made life so easy for me that it was almost criminal. I'd come in and everything was in register, ink in the screen, squeegees there. The only thing he didn't do for me, he didn't do the printing. I had to do the printing.
Oh, darn.
Which was, that kept me from going outside and smoking my cigar. But going through shops in Indonesia, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, etc. It's amazing to me how well those shops are laid out in case of a problem. I would grant you they're not little shops. I mean, some of them are obviously quite monstrous in size, but they have, not only clean floors and orderly situations, but it's rare to go into one of those shops that I've been to and find any dirt or anything on the floor. For one thing, I mean, a lot of the women don't wear shoes. And so to that end, nothing gets thrown on the floor because it would really be an inconvenience for them. Matter of fact, even some of the owners don't wear shoes, so they definitely keep it on the clean side. Going into US shops, it's kind of like, really, this place is a pigsty. You know, you can't walk through the front door. Your first impression of anything is when you walk through that front door. When you walk through that front door and the first thing you see is ink all over the carpet, two questions. One, why do you have ink on the carpet? Number two, why do you have carpet if you're going into a production facility other than the office area?
Mhm.
And they don't get it here. You know, they,
Well, and you know, and that's one of the big pushes we have. You know, Gary Jones and myself, we've really tried hard to get the word out about what you need to do, what resources we have to help you maintain a shop. We, you know, just like the one client of yours, Charlie, we worked with them to get a virtual OSHA inspection in place so that we could identify and help him, you know, so then the contractor can identify and say, hey, you know, this is what you need to what you need to put in place. And a lot of this is, you know, once you belong and you're a member of the Alliance, we have so many resources on our website that you can utilize. So even if you hire, you know, you'll hire an outside contractor to come in and do an audit and they go, hey, you need a hazard, you know, a right to know training program. We've got that. We've got a right to know training program. You know, so it's we have a lot of the tools. It's just how do we get everybody to understand that, as you've said, Charlie, they need to use these tools, and these tools are important.
I guarantee you, Charles is going to do a video on all of this. That's why he's sitting there and he's comfortably putting this all together in his head. He does really good videos.
Oh.
Thanks, Charlie.
So Shihan works for the university. You're in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then Farley
Hi, Wendy.
actually supports, is in Indonesia and supports a lot of the up and coming small printers or young kids.
Yeah.
Young kids.
I have a YouTube channel and a group for screen printing with 120K members.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So small scale, I try to teach them more on the DIY side.
Mm-hmm.
Do it yourself screen printing.
Not unusual to see the two of them here because you're on.
Mm.
Because you know, what's interesting, I know we're all
Alliance.
You're in the US, but at the same time, a lot of the same regulations do
Mhm.
fall into all the countries.
Right.
And just because somebody is in the US doesn't mean that, or in another country doesn't mean that what you have to offer isn't a valuable situation.
And I also think a lot of what we look at as safety and health practices is really common sense. As you indicated, Charlie, you keep the place clean. You don't want, you know, stuff on the floor. You want to make sure that everybody knows how to get out in case of an emergency. You want to make sure the equipment is operating safely. You want to make sure they understand how to operate the equipment safely and that they're not getting hurt. You need, you know, that the machine guards are kept in place, that they're wearing the correct personal protective equipment. They understand how to wear it and when to wear it. And they also understand the hazards associated with using the chemicals that we use, because the chemicals we use, they're chemicals.
Right.
They may not be very hazardous. And hazardous in my world has two different meanings, one for the environment and one for the safety and health. And in the apparel industry, a lot of the chemicals we use, even a lot of the ink systems, are not hazardous either environmentally or safety and health, but you still need to understand what those hazards are and to use the correct personal protective equipment. So really, when you look at safety and health in the workplace, it boils down to common sense, and it boils down to executive leadership and management leadership ensuring that they're putting these practices into place. There's my soapbox.
All right. Well, I know Shihan working for the university, I'm sure that some of that's going to be in his curriculum on things that you need to actually do in your shop to make it production friendly, as well as a place where um, you don't have accidents. I mean,
Right.
it's one of those things. It's always interesting to me when I go into a big shop. I don't, do you, well, when I first went to Samir's shop in Istanbul,
Hmm.
it was a pit. I mean, and I sent him the photos that I shot back then. That was back in 2004 or five. And it's like, oh, I feel like I'm in every American shop that I've ever been to. Um, it wasn't horrible. It was just ink on the garbage cans, screens on the floor. Um, if you brushed past a stack of shirts and you walk past a garbage can, you would potentially get the shirts dirty, etc. And pretty much, the ink room was cans here, cans there, etc. When he decided, or when the company decided to build their own building, so I helped him do some of the designing of it, especially the screen room. And he's an engineer by trade, so he does a killer job on his own. When you see his new building, which is not new anymore, you can't tell what the age of it is. You don't know if it's a day old or 10 years old. Everything has its place. You can eat off the floors in the factory. Literally, you can eat off the floors in the ink room and never worry about getting dirty. And and to me, he also has the best production shop in the world. I don't know anyone who can print as many garments per shift, per machine, anywhere. Every once in a while, somebody may hit that number. They do it consistently. That being said, he has now left that company and has opened his own.
Hmm.
I still don't have the name of it, but I'm sure it'll be one of those show shops as well.
Hmm.
Just knowing him.
Well, and as you said, knowing Samir and knowing his really commitment to providing a safe and clean workplace, that's really the number one, the number one issue and the number one thing priority. If upper management has that, we want to be clean, we want to be safe, we want to offer this to our employees, then it's going to stay that way.
Yeah.
Either here, internationally, wherever. And we do see that here in the States. There are there's a lot of businesses that want to do the right thing. And that's what we help them do, is to get their, house in order. And we've noticed it's become a lot more apparent. I don't know if that's the right word, but we are getting quite a few more requests for our documentation and our outreach materials, because I think during this unfortunate pandemic, people have had time to take a step back
Yeah.
and go, oh, okay, now what do I need to do to ramp up? And especially with all the COVID protection measures in place, but in just about every state, what does that mean for my business and how can I move forward?
Well, I think the thing that COVID did, not as a wonderful thing, but it did give you a chance to really spend time in your shop,
Mm-hmm.
reduce the number of employees. Unfortunately, in some shops, there were probably people that they wanted to get rid of and didn't know how to get rid of, and this gave them the excuse. But at the same time, they also needed to ramp up to get the work out the door and learn how to do it with fewer people. And the shops that I've gone to, I do hit the shops in the Denver area. They have definitely done a really good job. Although the top line is down, their bottom line is up, just because they've eliminated personnel
Mm-hmm.
and they've maximized what they're doing in terms of productivity. They've straightened out, and with Mike calling you, he
Mm-hmm.
bought the shop from another guy who I've been working with for years, and no one ever mentioned anything to him about OSHA other than the fact that he realized, look, as long as I bought this, I want to make sure that everything is correct in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those things. I don't think most people look at their shop in that respect of, am I really in compliance with everything that goes on?
I would have to agree. We do get quite a few calls, but that's I think that's one of the more fun, if I can use that word, parts of what myself and Gary do is we're able to help people. We're able to help people really, develop that safety culture in their facility. And we do have quite a few companies now that have a very strong safety culture. And that's our whole goal, is to keep spreading the word. And as I indicated, it's really, a lot of it is common sense, but unfortunately, sometimes it's also the law. So
Or it's screen
whether
printing.
you're operating here or internationally. So
Common sense seems to elude this industry at times.
okay, you said that, not me. All right.
As an ex-printer and as someone in the industry, I think sometimes you just have to get realistic. I mean, people do things here. I was just with a company that I don't know if I'm going to do the consulting work for them or not, but they're out of the textile industry. They actually make electronic little doodads that move and pulse and whatever. And I
Hmm.
said, well, to clean your ink, what do you use? Well, the manufacturer recommends MEK, but since we can't get that, we use acetone. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure I want to deal with either. I mean, I worked with MEK when I first moved to Denver, and it's like, you want to die young? I mean, come on. Oh, acetone. Well, probably not as bad as MEK, but certainly nothing that you want to get all over yourself.
No,
The,
it's interesting because the industry really wanted to move acetone out of their products because it is so highly flammable.
yep.
And then the US EPA, for environmental reasons, they listed it as, you don't have to consider it a volatile organic compound when you're calculating your VOCs. So then regulators wanted us to use acetone because it artificially lowered our VOC content for
Right.
regulatory purposes. And we're going, but we don't want to use acetone. We have fire hazards. It requires our ink rooms. If you're a textile printer, you have to get a storage cabinet. You have, I mean, our insurance goes up, all of these other ramifications that come into play when you're looking at changing out ingredients. And that I think is one of the more interesting and sometimes often frustrating parts of our job when we're dealing with the regulators, is getting them to see that we just don't look at it as a chemical to chemical substitution. We have to look at the total impact on the facility and what that means to the facility.
Yeah. What's interesting for those new people coming into this industry is they can't get accustomed to calling ink ink. They call it paint. And you have to
Mm,
keep reminding them, you call that paint, and you're going to be buying a fireproof cabinet for $1,500 to keep your paint into, which isn't flammable to begin with.
right. You need to call it ink and ink. It took us forever, when I first started, and when I first started in the industry, I would say, we're screen printing. We do not use fountain solutions. that was my kind of my mantra. And now with the Alliance, we represent obviously the commercial print market as well, and the flexo, the packaging, the digital, as well as the screen printing. But I cut my teeth on screen printing, so I can remember going in and having meetings where I would say, well, we don't use fountain solutions. We're a little different, but we still use inks. And you had to explain to them the differences in the ink technology based on the print process. And, that's getting them to understand that we're a manufacturing system and not an art form. Even though screen printing can be used as an art form, it's really looking at how can we continue to engage with them, understanding we're a manufacturing industry.
Yeah. All right, moving along here. So, Harley, how are you doing? I'm actually recording this one. I finally figured out how to record my sessions. It's like, so I
I'm
didn't
good.
get yours recorded, so I need to get you back on so we can go through that. But I figured out how to actually record. Computers and I, when I first got my computer, it's like, okay, so I got a PC. Years later, my wife bought me a Mac, my wife and daughter, and it's
Mm,
like, Oh, great. So now I know very little about a PC and just as little about a Mac. I can't figure either one of them out. But, you know, I grew up cutting film, using cameras, etc., not computer generated situations. Although I did have a very large camera. I had what they call the Robinson 480 low bed with a 10-foot bellows on it, and we had
Everything was done manually.
a GAM computer on it. I had to hire a union cameraman to turn on that damn camera. I couldn't figure out where the switch was. So I bought a little Newark for myself. So he did all the big stuff. I did all the little stuff. But in today's world, most people don't even know what some of those items are, you know. And you, Shihan, you're still using camera down there?
Yeah, we have one graphic camera at our institute. So I'm training the students how they did the film separations and everything on that camera.
Yeah, I had, you know, camera. I had automatic processors. Um, I loved doing all of that type of stuff back then. Unfortunately, time-wise, for us to do a design from inception to finished separations was, especially for rock and roll, 5-6 color job was about 30 to 40 hours of work. Where today,
Yeah, it's getting more time, more and more time.
yeah, today
Are those cameras still available nowadays?
the cameras,
Yeah.
yeah,
In Sri Lanka, only 2 cameras are there.
if you go to the junkyard, you'll probably find some of the old ones. I think you have to go to museums for those. But one thing I did find, so I'm cleaning out my basement, which I've been in this house for 25 years, and it was time to start organizing. So I have my stack of magazines that have articles that I've written. I found the very first T-shirt that I ever designed, and I actually have it.
It's
Oh, do you have it?
I do. It kind of shocked me. Now, it was washed once, so 90% of the color is gone because it was done with text dyes. But let me get it out. So you won't be able to actually read it, but it says Wings 76 Tour.
Ah, oh my God.
I can see it. I can see it.
I can
Wing
see it.
76 tour,
So
yeah.
I actually worked for ABC Network at the time, and I was doing that exact design for the Wings concert that was coming to Madison Square Garden. I was doing a button, and the guy who eventually became my partner came up, saw it, and said, "Hey, can you blow that up?" If you notice, it's not all that big, but when you're working on a button, that was considered pretty big. So I broke it into a 3-color job, and the printer who did it, so there was white, blue, and yellow and orange, and the orange is sitting on top of the white, and that's the only reason why you can really see the orange so easily.
Yeah.
It was
So you designed it, Charlie, but you didn't print it.
no. So that was designed back in June of '76. July 1st
Wow.
of '76 is when we opened up shop.
And that's when I was born.
Well, I hate to tell you, but in 1975, that's when I graduated from high school. So yeah.
Okay, yeah.
All righty then. Dealing with a bunch of young folks here. But no, the first shirt we actually did in-house was for Operation Sail. It was July 1st. It was the bicentennial. And so it was one of those things of doing tall ships and selling the shirts in the street. And we probably did 3,000-4,000 shirts. I mean, I had probably 25 guys out on the street selling them. Never kept one of those, which was fine. But that was the very first piece that I ever did. That's the one that got me sucked into this industry. Oh, well. Unfortunately, I don't have, I did find some other thing. I found my first 4-color process job.
Wow.
And so it's for Natural Light.
Oh,
Beer companies did a lot of
yeah.
promotions for the running community. 'Cause
Right.
back then we would race, finish a race, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning and there's beer that you can drink as much of as you want. I think some people just registered so they could drink all the beer that they could, which is
I, for one, after I run a race, cannot understand how people can drink beer, but that's just a personal thing.
well, nowadays you can't. I mean,
No, some of them still have it. Depends on the race.
oh, because my understanding is if you get into an accident coming home from that,
Oh,
the beer company is responsible.
yeah, maybe you're right, because it's been a while since I've seen, but all I crave after I finish one of my races is a cup of coffee, and we just head for the local nearest coffee shop.
Oh, well, I was going to say, you didn't find coffee at the end of the race. I mean, lots to drink, but not coffee.
I know. Nope. I had my water, but dang it all, I want that cup of coffee, because
Yeah,
you
well,
always start these
I'm
races.
with you.
going-
I mean, you can't drink the coffee before you race, otherwise you're going to be racing in the wrong direction.
Correct.
So I'm in the midst of writing 2 books. One almost done, a technical book on screen printing, textile
Oh,
screen
good.
printing, based on all the articles and stuff that I've written over the years. Been going through, modifying, adding some photos,
Mhm.
leaving some articles intact, even though they are not quite up to today's situation. I decided, you know what? These are some of the things that I dealt with anyway, so why not? And then for that, I started writing about some of the history that I went through. My first trade show, my first SPA show in '77. And I've never missed a show since, by the way. But in writing that, I was going to use that like to start every chapter. And then I realized I've got so much, it's another book worth. So I've eliminated anything technical from that. And that one will be more my history in the industry.
Mhm.
So been kind of fun because trying to remember things from back then, I've been contacting some of the people that were involved to have them read over the area that addresses their situation. So far, it's been pretty good. I have no idea how long it's going to take. It's going to take a long time on that one, but I do want to finish my technical one.
Interesting. Well, that's really good. I think that's important. I think you need to have these technical books as well as these books of history about the industry, so that you can document where the industry started and really look at the gains that the industry has made. And it's people like you, Charlie, when you look at where it started and how the textile screen industry started and where it's actually gone and all the innovations that have taken place, both in the use of equipment and the chemicals and the product, et cetera, and now even into the, the digital end. So it is, I think it's just a fascinating look.
I think so too. I think for a lot of people that are in the industry now, I don't think they understand how things had to come down back in the day.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think they understood anything about cameras or artwork that had to be done by hand.
Right. Well,
Using,
yeah. I mean, I
using,
remember when I first started in the industry, a lot of people were still hand cutting their stencils.
yeah, hand cutting, zipatone
Interesting. Yeah.
for half tones,
Right.
that
Both.
press type.
That's why I find it interesting that Sheehan is actually working with his students and showing them photography, and look and how do you shoot the screens and do the separations
everything.
that way. I think that's important. It's, to understand that basic concept, and then you can move into the direct to film
Yeah.
technology. But I think
So
that
that they can't move on.
Mhm.
They should know
I
the
agree.
basic knowledge, everything, how to prepare the films and how to prepare the artwork for printing. So I'm practically teaching them how to do that
Yes,
with the,
I
with
think
the
that's great.
technology.
I think it's, I think it's one of those things where it would almost be fun if we had a camera and stuff set up, just so that people could understand what a PMT film was, or some of the litho films where
Mhm.
you had to shoot a negative first, and then
Then after that, we have to get the
equal
positive.
positive to get a hard dot. And everybody's saying, hard dot, what the hell's a hard dot? It's not coming from your Epson printer, that's for sure. But yeah, and I go back to my early days with SPA, SGAI, SGIA, all the different changes and stuff. I found I put together, I think it was before your day, one of the tech symposiums that was held in California, in San Diego in '86.
Yep, definitely. I started in March of '89.
Okay, so I found all the prints. So the project was an interesting one. I actually still have the original film. I'm like I said, I've been trying to put together this whole thing that I'm hoping people find interesting. So I don't know if you can see it. There we go. So
Okay, yeah.
so that's the original. And I have all the prints. So what we did was, or what I did, was I contacted Andy Anderson to do all the printing of everything. I had one guy do his separations on a computer, another one doing them by hand, totally. Another one, Serochrome Seps, did the separations electronically. I think 4 different variations. I know Kudre was involved as well. And we then did this technical symposium on where each of them did a presentation about what they did and how they did it. And I do have all the prints now. So talk about old. I mean, you know, after 25 years of not touching anything and then finally getting into it, it was kind of like, oh my God. And there it is. But kind of fun stuff. But Shion, if you want, I actually have, I think 3 sets of those. Maybe I'll get the set that I can send out to you next time I get to Sri Lanka.
Sure, sir.
I don't understand how those photographic films looks like. I mean, was it in color, the films?
Well, okay, so what we started out is what they call the chrome. So this is like a slide.
Okay.
It's very big. Okay,
Yeah.
I think this is 3 by 4 or 4 by 5, I forget.
Yeah.
Inches. So everyone involved got one of these to work with, and so you can see
I can see this. Yes.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
after developed film.
The film has the lights of the film has 3 colors, right? Red, green, and
Full
blue.
color, yes. And so each of the prints were done to duplicate this. So in this, there are primary colors, some secondary colors, and flesh tones. And that was the big thing, was to add flesh tones into it, because that was always the most complex part of screen printing, which it still is today, is trying to get a flesh tone that looks like it belongs, as opposed to getting too far off track. In any event, I had Andy Anderson print everything because I think he is the most controlled printer that I know. And so I think he had to shoot 150 different screens to get this all done, something like that. I forget. It's actually in one of I found the technical papers that were given out. But it's one of those things where today you would probably just have to scan this and everybody would take a scan and try and do whatever they could with it. But I actually supplied everyone with a Chrome about what they needed to do and how well they could come, or how close they can come to this finished product. I think it actually would. I know Mike Ruff did something like that with the whole digital side, because he actually used a photo of me dressed up with a pilot's helmet and a cigar in my mouth.
He may have, because,
He did
you know,
send me.
he is fairly, you know, Mike is fairly big into color.
Very much so. And so, you know,
Right.
putting it out on different machines, manipulating it differently was all
Right.
part of his song and dance, which is not far removed from what we did back in '86, other than it's the contemporary version.
Mhm.
And, you know, the one thing I'm sorry about that technical symposiums on the textile side just don't exist anymore, which is unfortunate. We have so many people coming into the industry because of the pandemic. We lost a bunch. We have a bunch still coming in that don't understand anything about any of the technicalities. I mean, I read about it online, and it's like, oh, can I do 4-color process? Well, if you have a computer and you have Photoshop, yes, you can. It's like, really, if it was that easy, everybody and their grandmother would be doing it. And the reality is it's not. It's not the most complex thing in the world, but you do have to follow procedures. And
Mhm.
as a matter of fact, I found I think it was before your day. So
Oh my God.
Troubleshooting.
so
Well, I don't know. When I joined
SPAI.
SPA, it was SPAI, right?
Is it
But
now SGIA? SPAI?
now we're the Printing United Alliance. So
Okay, that's
SGIA and the Printing Industries of America merged last May, and we rebranded ourselves as the Printing United Alliance. But as I say,
okay.
I came from the screen and digital part. I came from SGIA. That's my background. And then my
Okay.
colleague, Gary Jones, he came from the commercial print. So we
Oh,
pretty much cover the breadth of the industry. But I
Oh,
think, Charlie, to your point, you're right that people don't realize that textile screen printing is a controlled manufacturing process,
totally.
and that you do need to pay. You know, I'm technical. You know, I'm about know enough about technical to get into trouble, but it really all starts with the creation of the screen. If you create a good screen and you hold that register and you're able to create that good screen, then you're going to have, you know, the good prints. And when you start looking at where you might have some issues with your process, you do the root cause analysis. Oftentimes it goes back to the basic screen making.
What's
But
interesting, so to do this, they SPAI contacted, I think there was either 4 or 6 of us, myself, Kudre, and I can't tell you who the others were. I'm afraid my memory doesn't work that far back. But I think we went to Savannah, Georgia, and they locked us in a motel room for 2 solid days. And basically, they had this whole outline of problems that printers have run into. And it was our job to go through them from art preparation on cause and effect, you know, what the problem is, and different solutions for each of those problems. And so it went through each of the different stages. I'm afraid to read some of them because they're quite antiquated, you know, but I mean, and some of them still come up today. The first one on art, misspelled copy on the finished art or printed order, you know, and then the artist is careless. I think what we didn't put down was shoot the artist, but nevertheless, but you know,
but you
I
know, but
was-
Charlie, this really points to, that was one of the reasons why, you know, and you and I are both members, the Academy of Screen and Digital Print Technologies was actually developed. So it was developed to provide this level of technical guidance to the industry. You know, back in the early 70s, we started looking at, you know, this was before both yours and my time, but in the early 70s, they launched the Academy to really develop these technical guidebooks and the troubleshooting manuals. So it is fascinating to see how so much has been historically gathered, but then also how much continues to be offered by members of the Academy.
Yeah. Well, I still have my technical guidebooks, the original ones, and I have the CD. But the thing that I really have to admit that I miss is when we did do those technical symposiums.
Mhm.
We would definitely find a topic that was a very pertinent topic based on what was going on, and they would definitely get a great turnout. That was never the issue. Um, there's a difference between reading an article and being able to actually talk to someone who's doing the
Mhm.
presentation, showing the results of the presentation. You don't necessarily have to have a machine or anything, but um, I spoke at my first technical symposium in 1980 in Pittsburgh. And
Mm.
years later, I decided, you know what, this is definitely something that I think too many people are really interested in and don't understand enough about where computer, I mean, in 1986, you have to understand the computers that we were dealing with were probably the early Macs or the
Mhm.
Texas Instruments or whatever it was at that time. I don't know. I avoided that myself. But in today's world, there's so much going on the digital side as well as the screen print side, and the combination of the two.
Right.
And you don't necessarily have to be there to go through the process of what's working, what isn't working, why is it working. Don't tell me that I like this ink more than that ink. Tell me why you like that ink versus another ink.
Mhm.
Uh, I just think that that's one of those things that's missing, and which is unfortunate. I mean, I understand. I'm not putting the burden on you. Although, are they going to be putting together any more workshops at headquarters or?
I don't know. Right now, our headquarters are still closed.
Okay.
We don't have, there hasn't been any announcement as to when they're going to be reopening our headquarter building. We're headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. I do know we're moving full steam ahead to have our trade show in October.
Yep.
And I think that that will definitely be an in-person event, as we're starting to see more and more, Charlie, like you and I, that are getting our vaccines and people are starting to travel. And I know, we're working towards that to really have that be an in-person event in October in Orlando. I had to think
I'm
a minute
hoping
where
so.
we.
I'm hoping. I'm waiting for the very first show to open, whatever show it is. I don't care. But
Yeah, I think it realistically, I believe in-person events will start on a small scale this summer.
yeah, I know ISS or Impressions Expo is
Mhm.
slated to do Atlantic City at the end of August, which
Correct.
I do believe will come off.
Right. I think this summer is a good level of expectation. I know some of our smaller events are going to be taking place this summer in person, and then ramping up to the larger event in October.
Terrific.
Yay.
Well, ta-da. In any event, it was fun having you on.
Well, thank
Enjoyed it.
you. I enjoyed it. It's great to see you again, even
And
if it is
you.
just virtually.
And we have a meeting coming up of the Academy
Yes,
shortly.
in April 14th,
Well,
I think.
April starts tomorrow.
I know. So Laura Maybaum, who's the current chair of the Academy, she and Dave Dennings, the vice chair of the Academy, they're working on an agenda. So we're going to be talking about quite a few things. We'll talk about our student printing awards, the Tom Fresca Student Printing Awards, how to nominate and get, for the new members, as well as looking at really launching the Joe Clark Innovator Award. That will also be there. And so we have quite a bit to discuss and to move forward, as well as looking at how we can, just like you're doing with your history of the screen printing, but then how can the Academy continue to operate as those experts?
Is it internationally, those awards, or is it only for the States?
Nope, internationally. The Academy is an international body.
Okay. And-
So we do, there's, we have quite a few international members.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
I don't know how many, but we've got them from France, Germany, India.
Mhm,
I mean, I don't know the list of them, but
right.
last thing, so I owned a supply house for 13 years or so. And Michelle
Mm.
Kaza was always coming out to speak at it. And
Mm.
so somewhere in the mid 90s, he mentioned to me that he was putting me in for the membership in the academy. I didn't even know what that was at the time. But I didn't get in at that time. I didn't get in until 2004. But it was one of those things where back in those days, I don't think anyone really knew much about the academy. Of course, it was much smaller than today. I think it's slowly we're working our way out. But
Yeah. And I think too, what we're seeing is that the academy is being recognized as those, I don't want to say leaders, but those technical experts in the industry. So
yeah,
you have quite, and it's not only just in the garment industry, you have from the industrial sector, you have from the graphics sector, you have printers, you have others like Charlie, the consultants and the contractors. There's a couple of us from the association that are in the academy. So it's really a very broad spectrum of people, from the suppliers and printer. You just basically have to be in the printing industry. And generally we draw from the screen and digital side.
right.
So
And we're always looking for international
yes.
people who would qualify.
Mhm.
Is it okay if I promote the I don't know the what do you call it, it's a competition, right?
Well, so
it's
we
not.
have a student competition, and I think that when we have the student competition open, then Charlie can send out, or you can contact me. Charlie knows how to get a hold of me, and we'd be happy to send you out the information, because the competition is open to all students
And then
and
and from every nation
everywhere.
from,
You don't have to be, it's international.
okay. Marcy, I sent you a friend request in Facebook. If we can, if I can have information for further information for later.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Wednesday is usually not the time I do that. I usually do it Tuesday, but I was traveling. I do have Graham from FESPA coming on in 2 weeks.
Oh, good.
So if you want to jump in, and that will be on a Tuesday at
Okay.
the same time, but on a
I will
Tuesday.
have to, just to say hi to Graham.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't chatted with him at all for a while, and Graham is another member of the academy, a fairly new member of the academy.
Right. And just a great guy.
He is, and love to see you guys all show up as well. Also, since I did record this, and I thought this session was really a great one, it's going to be posted on my website
Okay.
under Charlie's Corner, and website is talbleepconsulting.com. So if anybody wants to fill in on any of the things that went on, just go there. I'm going to shut off the recording shortly, and I will have it downloaded. And I don't even do that. It's actually done from a friend in India, because if I had to do it, you guys wouldn't ever see anything. So, but Marcy, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, well, thank you, Charlie. I really had fun. And I'm definitely going to mark my calendar so that I can join you during Graham's discussion and chat, because I'd really like to see Graham.
Terrific. Farley, while
right.
I have you on, and Shehan,
Nice to meet
I'd like to invite you both as being guests. So I'll write both of you and tell you what dates I have open, because Farley, I need to get back to you since I know how to record now. This way we can get you. Farley has quite a following. How many people are following you now?
In Facebook, until the limit, it's 5,000.
Wow.
Facebook has only 5,000, but yeah, my group, Sablon Bukan Salon, it's a Facebook page. Yeah, that one has 120,000 members.
Wow.
125,000 now.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Wow.
on Facebook, I'm at 5,000 and they won't let me go any further either, but,
Yeah.
and Shihan, I'd love to have you come on. You can give us a rundown on what you're doing at the school, as well as what's going on in Sri Lanka now.
Mhm.
We'll take it from there. All right, I'm shutting
Excellent.
this down. Thank you all. Hope you have a
Okay,
good
thank you.
night
Bye.
and,
Bye, everyone.
stay dry. Bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Okay, everyone. Okay, bye.